started. Welcome to Asia Society Hong Kong, and I am Alice Mong, President of Asia Society Hong Kong. This is today is our last program of the year. And it's a nice program, happy program to end with. And I am so delighted that all of you are here to see for this talk. Apologize. How many of you have seen the show in the gallery? Okay, one. Sharon has, I know, two. And I apologize if you're not able to see the show today. It's technically a show done by How to Work and as well as PopMar, and we are the venue sponsors. So tickets are going to be on sale, I believe, Tuesday, and you can reserve it. Reserve ticket if you can get online. I hear tickets sells out in 5 minutes every week. So, but if you are a member of Asia Society Hong Kong, we do have slots in the 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock afternoon. So that's one way you can see the show. You may not be able to buy certain products, but you can see the show. So I encourage you, if not yet a member, become a member. And the show is on until January 4th. The Labubu show, the Monster 10th anniversary. And it's because of the show that we can do the talk today. Objects of obsession, toys and cuteness as a cultural phenomenon. And we're delighted. Dr. Bing Chen, a research assistant, Professor Pui Yee, Dr. Lui, Tai-lok, Professor Adjunct Research Chair, Professor at Educational University of Hong Kong, and Dr. Natalie Ngai, Assistant Professor of Media Studies at Loyola Marymount University. She's going to join us online from California. And thank you, Ingrid Chu, for helping us moderate. Ingrid is an independent writer and curator. And so we are going to get the program started shortly. But the reason I'm really excited about today's program is, I don't know, how many of you collect cute little things or anything? All right, I see a few. I collect. So it's okay. There's something about these that's why it's called objects of obsession. I started collecting I think it's about 12 years ago. Remember when we had the duck? And I now have a wonderful collection of about 100 ducks from all over the world. And it's in my office. Happy to show it to you when we have time. And it's something that I've always been curious about. Why are we here, especially in Asia? I see taxi drivers. Sometimes they will have a lot of little collectibles. My sister, who is both a Miffy fan and a Hello Kitty fan. So she has a lot of little things. Growing up in the US as a Chinese American, I think she was really obsessed with Hello Kitty. So I think coming back to Asia, I think we all have something that I see it almost every day. But this Labubu phenomenon is actually not just Labubu. I think, if you think about collectibles, I remember reading a story a couple of years ago, I think in the Chinese paper, about a woman here in Hong Kong who started collecting Snoopy. She's probably in her 70s now, when Snoopy was first introduced to Hong Kong, probably about 50 years ago. And I remember reading the article, and one of the things, this is about 10 years ago, I came back from seeing a show of Hello Kitty at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles. And I wanted always to kind of do a show like that, where my dream was to do 3 figures that I thought would represent obsession of collecting: Snoopy, Miffy, and Hello Kitty. And each is from different country, one from America, one from Europe, Netherlands, and the other one from Japan. Using that as a kind of a discussion point. Why do we collect, and why are these characters? They're not recent. Snoopy has been around for over 70 years. I think Miffy is about 60, isn't it? Homeless is celebrating the birthdays. Each of them have been around for a while. And I think the latest obsession is definitely now Labubu monsters, the characters that Kasing Lung has created. So this is really a good time for us to talk about this. And also, another thing, my friend Sharon and I were talking about over lunch, you just look at the newspaper today. Every day there's bad news. And today, for 3 hours, we were volunteering in the gallery, and to see a lot of adults, some children come in happy, and everybody bringing in their own Labubu, taking photos with their favorite character. It's very positive. And I think in some ways, in this day and age, maybe our panelists can explain this positive energy that I've been seeing. And I think we need more of it, and frankly, and especially over this holiday. But I think this is one of the reasons I'm so excited. Like Chris was able to put together this panels in a really short period of time, because the show, we only knew we were going to do the show about 2 months ago. So everything has been last minute, and the tragedy of what happened in Taipo also has postponed the show. And we're now hoping that we can bring some of the kids, more kids from the community, to see the show if it's possible. And I do feel this positive energy and vibe from this exhibition. I would love to share it and also learn more about it, and from our distinguished panelists today, about why is it in this day and age we are adults. I think, in fact, I see more adults bringing their own Labubu for the exhibition than I do the kids. And I think we can answer some of these questions and really explore. I also, Sharon, who's a psychologist, the psychology. What is the psychology behind all of this? I'm really curious, and I'm hoping our distinguished panel can help us address some of that. And I hope, I just want to wish all of you a happy holiday season. It's times like this, I think the community, and I want to share a lot of this positive energy with all of you. And thank you all for being part of Asia Society Hong Kong, and look forward to seeing you at future programs. So thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for that wonderful introduction, and again to Chris for the kind invitation, and our distinguished speakers today, who Alice, I think, already gave a wonderful introduction to. I won't say too much more than that. I think you can read up on their long and illustrious careers in different aspects of what we'll talk about today. But I think Alice hit the nail on the head, where we're talking about broad references to cuteness, toys, and all kind of filtered through Labubu and this exhibition. So we'll talk about it from different perspectives today. We'll start with about 10-minute presentations from each of our speakers. Natalie will be zooming in, so she'll do that. And then we'll have a nice panel discussion, and then we'll open it up to questions. So I think we can start. With Tai-lok, who's going to, I think, look at the sort of history of toys more from a local perspective of Hong Kong and the region. And then we'll move to Bin, who will talk a little bit about Labubu specifically, and then Natalie on the sort of culture of cuteness. So with that, you want to start?
Thank you, Ingrid, and thanks to Asia Society again for the invitation. And it's really my pleasure to have the opportunity of joining the panel and to share with you some of my, understanding. Well, I probably just know a couple of things about Labubu itself, so I won't touch a lot on it. Rather, I would like to contextualize Labubu in the wider Hong Kong context, and that's why I talk about before and after. In other words, the questions that I'm asking and the answer I'm going to give would be to provide a broader and perhaps a longer perspective for us to understand the Labubu phenomenon. It starts with the idea of toys, partly because echoing the main theme of the whole series is about objects of obsession, and also mentioned in the subtitle would be toys and cuteness. I won't touch on the cuteness part, but the toy part, I think, is itself is interesting, because as I would discuss on this further on, is the backdrop of understanding Labubu was the emergence of designer toy in Hong Kong in the 1990s, and that's a very important background. And the further background of that, of course, is our own changing idea about toys. And one of the interesting things about toys is that it the idea itself doesn't prescribe any particular form or object. For example, this is a kid playing with a piece of toy supposed to be riding on a horse, something like that. When I show it to my peers, most of them immediately responded by saying that this must be a rich kid. Because when we were young, way back in the 1950s, 60s, of course, you would never have this kind of toy, would never dream of buying a piece of toys for pretending to be riding on a horse. What you need is just a piece of stick. Or even if nothing, that you imagine that you're playing, riding on a horse, and that would be good enough. So one of the interesting things about toy is it doesn't have any particular form. The most important part of it is about play. It's about imagination. It involves the person who is using this piece of toys or consuming it, inject on their own story. You do your own interpretation. And in the process, of course, one very important thing is that you have certain kind of experience. You have joy, you have pleasure, and so on. And in this regard, starting from day one for our understanding of toys is that is always interactive, and the consumer, the customer itself, is never passive. No one is, you just play with a piece of toys as if you're being told to. Normally, you would play with a piece of toys with your own imagination. And that, I think, is something very important. And that also brings in the idea I want to underline is the kind of duality of toys is not only is interactive, but at the same time, you cannot understand toys simply from the manufacturing or producer's perspective, because it's always involved how the consumers, how the people who play with toys in return to reshape the toy culture itself. And a lot of us probably nowadays would have forgotten about the evolution of toys, because way back in the old days, of course, we don't even go and buy toys. We make toys. I don't know whether you have ever made your own beanbag, the small one, or with rice, and then you can play with, I don't know how to say it, but anyway, I find some when I have my grandson. So I tend to think that, every family should have a set of toys like this. And then, of course, everyone's saying that you don't nowadays anymore. But way back, we don't necessarily go to buy a piece of toy. You just play with anything that you have, or your parents or grandparents allow you to play with. But gradually, with the evolution of mass media and mass culture, increasingly our toys are being shaped by mass media and also by toy manufacturers. So TV series, movies, of course, the really tipping point, groundbreaking would be Star Wars. But even before that, don't forget, 007, Star Trek, they are all very important in shaping toys that we have. So that's come in merchandising. Gradually, you have toys not only with a label, but also connected with the commercial success of certain movies or TV series or whatever you find in pop culture. The second thing is, because of that, gradually you also have a new kind of consumer culture around toys. For example, formation of tribes. After Star Wars, of course, fans of Darth Vader is all over the world. And a lot of people would, have all kinds of collections of any size Darth Vader. And of course, in Hong Kong, we understand that, and I have a conversation with him many years ago, is a movie star Cuteness. He's a big collector of Darth Vader's costume, one-to-one. And I remember that we have a conversation over tea, and he suggests to me that, Tai-lok, since you're interested in Star Wars, I just noticed that you can buy the one-to-one real-size X-Wing Star Wars airplane. It's not that expensive. You can afford it. Why don't you think about it? I said, hey, it's not about the money. It's about the size of my home. Do you think that I can put an X-Wing in my own apartment? You got to be kidding me. You can do that, not me. Well, we have fans. These kind of fans, they're becoming tribes, not only sharing their interests, but basically about information and how they would interpret them and so on and so forth. And gradually, of course, toys also becoming collectibles. in the past 30, 40 years is a big thing. Of course, you say toys have always been collectibles, way back to the aristocratic families in Europe in maybe 18th century, 17th century. They have doll houses. Of course, they have collectibles as well, but in the past 30, 40 years, of course, is becoming something more affordable. Ordinary people would collect, and they would display, and then gradually you change the way that you look at toys. Whereas in the old days, you buy a piece of toy, you play with it immediately. Most of the friends that I know of, nowadays they would buy toys and then buy two pieces at the same time. One would open the box, the other would always keep it untouched, put it aside just for looking at them. Ask me what's the source of joy by just looking at it. That's up to individuals' interpretation. But then the thing is, now you change it into something collectible. And it's exactly because of that. Nowadays, we also have vintage toys, reproduction of, Star Wars figurines way back in 1978, something like that. And more interestingly is the fourth point about the kind of duality of toys is consumers strikes back. One very big thing is when Lego get into, kind of stagnation in its own business. One of the major discoveries that there are adult fans playing with Legos, and then they have their own designs. And Lego, by learning from these adult fans, they create the creator series and so on and so forth. So for example, this is one of the creator series that we have. So the people who play with toys reshape the whole thing. And in fact, by the time of the 1990s, in the mid-1990s, is a very interesting turning point in the history, is that suddenly a lot of people around the world, they have a new conception of toys. For example, McFarlane started to produce figurines. For example, the Spawn series is really fine details, very technical, very skilled, and then convinced most of the people that, nowadays toys is not just for kids, it's for adults that would really appreciate it. Around the same time, 1996, Kyoto Hoyongtong in Japan, he works with Takashi Murakami, and then they produce pieces of his art into toys that you would find it just about 200 yens and so on. Medicom started with the bear bricks, and then nowadays we have all these bear bricks with different designs open for designers and so on. And then, of course, this is also the beginning of crossover. In 1997, Japanese street fashion store in Harajuku, Bounty Hunter launches its own figure, plastic figures, Kid Hunter, to promote its own brand name for fashion. Sorry, time's up. So Hong Kong actually catch up with that. So I would do it in 1 minute. It's Michael Lau is a big figure in this turnaround. He produced the 99 Gardener series, and then that is the beginning of using figures to becoming a piece of art. That's the breakdown of the boundary of how we look at toys. And then the other people like Eric So, 3-0, Brother 3, and so on. And then this is around the time that Hong Kong set up all these basic infrastructures like magazines, exhibitions, to promote that kind of new initiatives. And then, of course, Hot Toys and How to Work also played a big part in further developing this role. And then, of course, in Hong Kong, this old model reached a kind of plateau around 2005 and so on. And this is one of the interesting things, that when Pop Mart came into the picture, it reshaped the whole pattern of development. And I think we need to recognize that, and probably I will talk more about that because of running out of time. We'll come back to this point if we want to further look into that part of it. So the point I want to make is there's a process of evolution of designer toy, starting off with toys into design, into art, into a new way of expression. And then in return, of course, you can also think about how Lung Ge actually is connected with Kenny Wong, and also connected with this much bigger designer toy picture. And of course, the title of my talk is Before and After. Well, so what will happen next? Of course, it depends on how you look at it. It may continue to be just a piece of toy, but maybe you can look at it as a piece of affordable art. And all these things, I believe, is open And of course, we can further discuss this later on. Sorry about overrunning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tai-lok. This is a good perfect segue for Bin Chen, and he's going to speak about specifically a case study almost about Labubu, which will dive a little bit deeper into the key player of our exhibition just in the Asia Society galleries.
Thank you, Ingrid, for the introduction. Yeah, and Asian Society for inviting me, and Chris for organizing this panel. And this is actually the very first time I made a presentation out of universities. Very exciting event. And I also prepare a note. This will make sure that I won't go beyond the time limit. But it might be a little bit boring, but I apologize for that. So this is an ongoing research I made with my student Wang Yi, who is also here. And we my original field is modern Chinese history, and then later on I become fascinated about Chinese pop culture, and also Labubu come to our attention. We find that Labubu phenomenon very interesting, fascinating, and in particular we want to understand and when and how people make connection to make connection between Labubu and China, right? When and how people will associate Labubu with China. So this is our research question. We find long story short, we find a very interesting a contrast, if you will. It is our impression that the general public or the consumers, the regular consumers, when they, in particular in the global market or the international market, I use the global market, international market interchangeably. Consumers, international consumers, when they purchase Labubu, it is our impression that they were not thinking about China or Chinese culture, right? And but the mainstream media's take is quite different, right? And they explicitly link Labubu to China's soft power, right? And I didn't just make this up, right? There's The Economist. How many of you know Economist? Right? The Economist, Chinese we translate, and Mandarin Chinese we translate into 经济学人. Of course, is a very respectable magazine, and it just published an article on November 12th this year, and its title is "China's culture exports are boosting its soft power. Labubu is just the beginning." Right. So, do I need to say more about mainstream media's connection? I try to make the connection between Labubu and China's soft power. Right? And it's not just The Economist. We also have a BBC made a similar point, and also China's mainstream media like Xinhua Se made similar point. Basically, Labubu is energizing China's soft power, boosting China's soft power, right? In particular, after the pandemic, because the narrative goes that the pandemic actually damaged China's soft power a little bit. Oh, sorry. So, but is it really true, right? And how did Labubu? So that's our question. Well, how did Labubu energize China's soft power when their buyers, Labubu's buyers, were not necessarily thinking of Chinese culture or China, right? And is Labubu's boost to China's soft power basically a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that it's only working because we keep talking about it, we keep saying that, we keep making that connection, right? We keep saying that Labubu boosts China's soft power, and therefore this discourse itself boosts China's soft power, right? So that's what we want to find out in our research, right? Again, this is an ongoing project. We are sharing some preliminary findings. More research is, of course, needed. So I have claimed that and when international consumers, when they purchase Labubu products, it is our impression that they are not necessarily thinking of Chinese culture or China, but impression is not good enough in the research. So we want to test it. We want to test it on the data we collect from the internet, from social media, and from YouTube, to be more specific, right? We want to see how people were talking about, what people were talking about, and how they were talking about Labubu when they were consuming Labubu product. Did China or Chinese culture ever come out during their conversations, in their comments, in the video, more specific? So again, right now we focus on YouTube's, the data we collect from YouTube, but later on, of course, we will have to expand the scope. Right? But Labubu's popularity, right, in the international market, it's typically traced back to Lisa, this moment. According to BBC, it's that Labubu's popularity soared in April 2024, when this Thai-born K-pop superstar Lisa began to posting photos on her Instagram with various Labubu products, Labubu dolls, and the data we collect, the sales figure actually can support this narrative. Right? Yes, indeed, Labubu's sales grew very rapidly in 2024. So another chart. Because of time limits, I will not go into details. So we believe that this narrative is largely true, because we are talking about Labubu's in the global market. So Lisa's promotion of Labubu provides the starting point for the data we collect. And on YouTube, there is a even more specific a beginning point. Like this video, Lisa's Secret Obsession, was first published on November 13, 2024 by the Vanity Fair, Vanity Fair's YouTube channel. So for this study, we use November 13, 2024 as the beginning point. Right? We look at YouTube content tagged, and we collect until the data from until November 15, 2000 this year, November this year. We just briefly explain our methodology. We look at YouTube content tagged with hashtag Labubu from that data through November 2024. And also to keep the sample manageable and relevant, we only select videos that were directly about Labubu and had at least 20 comments. YouTube, you can make comments, right? A video that has at least 20 comments, then we will collect that. We then focus on the top comments as filtered by the YouTube's algorithm. And also, to make sure that we are capturing authentic consumer voices, we exclude accounts that had posted more than 3 Labubu videos to avoid professional or fan page bias. We also weed out spam, pure emoji comments, and people just typing the word Labubu, like very simple comments. So in the end, we make deep analysis of 39 videos and narrow down over 40,000 comments to a final sample of around 6,000 valid entries, 6,000 valid comments. So briefly about what we find out. We then, of course, categorize those videos and comments. So here is a categorization of the videos based on its contents. Most videos were about opening blind boxed. They just show how they opened blind boxed, and also showcasing the Labubus they have. And also here's an analysis of the comments on the videos. Most comments were about commenters' own experience when they opening a Labubu blind boxed. Then commenters will also like to discuss the appearance of the Labubu, how cute the Labubu is. And also whether Labubu in the video was real or fake. This is also something that they would discuss. So almost no one mentioned China, of course, but there are exceptions. We call them special comments. You have someone who tried to tell the backstory of Labubu. Most comments are very simple. There's someone who did try to tell the backstory that it's designed by a Hong Kong-born artist, and it's in the storybook, originally in the storybook. And meanwhile, not all comments are positive. There are some negative comments about Labubu. Some say that you have the Labubu has it's basically a spiring doll. Their eyes have cameras. It has GPT checkers in them. So be careful, don't buy it. And also some say that Labubu are like the demons. They're based on the design is based on demons. So it's not a gift that you want to buy for anybody, right? So not all comments are positive. There are negative comments, but still, even the negative comments, they don't necessarily say that it's because they're from China, so and the Chinese manufacturers put a GPT checker in it. So it's not. So I think it by and large like confirm our impression. But again, the mainstream media they tell a different story. So because I'm running out of time, I will just jump to the conclusion. And when they did mention China, when the consumers, when they did mention China, normally it's just that very basic information. Oh, it's from China. It's made in China. Labubu is from China. Popma is in China. This kind of association, very simple association. But mainstream media, they would love to say that, you see, we are use this soft power phenomenon, say that has China become cool, has the world's perception about China changed because of Labubu? I would say that we have been looking for, because China is an economic giant, we have been looking for evidence to support that, because it's an economic giant, so that it will be a soft power giant, right? We have been looking for this narrative. And Labubu, I not say that Labubu has nothing to do with China or is not contributing to China's building of soft power, but our initial results shows that when we try to associate Labubu with China's soft power, I think we need to be more specific, right? We need to be careful, because Labubu, this is really a very special case, right? It's a Chinese product, but it's also a global product, right? It's designed by a Hong Kong-born artist, but it became popular because of China's manufacturing power, right? But it became popular also because of a Tai-born superstar's promotion. So it's a very special case. Well, I will stop here. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bin Chen. And we're going to move to a Zoom, and I believe Natalie should be online. And she's going to talk a little bit about it's her PhD and ongoing research, and I believe some upcoming publication around the seriousness, but also the levity around cuteness as culture.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Can you not? Okay. Good, I see you. So thank you for having me. This is super exciting. My research is about like cuteness, media, and aesthetics. All right. And while like dialogue was like talking about a lot of like cool, guys' toys, right? I'm actually a very unapologetic Barbie fan. So I was like very jealous when you guys are talking, because I cannot be there like physically. But like zooming at home has a advantage. I want to show you. This is anime one. I cannot see it. I burned my video. Anyway, this is like a Barbie. Can you see that? Okay, yeah. This is actually anime one. One of the first Asian American actress in Hollywood. And I was always wondering, why do like men's toys can become collectible, but while women's or like girls are often seen as some kind of like cheap toys. Just a question that comes to my mind. when we were talking about toys. So dialogue gives us a very fascinating overview of toys as an imaginative experience, and remind us to very often neglect the history of Hong Kong designer toy making, and being, give us a very meticulous analysis of like Labubu as a form of like quote unquote Chinese soft power. So building on what they just shared, my presentation wants to add a little bit something different. What exactly is cuteness? Does Labubu travel well across the ocean from East Asia to the United States? So these are the like different kind of questions that I'm going to ask. All right. So right now I'm going to share my screen here. Second. Right. Okay, should be able to see it. So right now I'm actually zooming from Los Angeles. I live in a neighborhood called Santa Monica. A few weeks ago, I walked to another neighborhood called like Venice Beach, which is a very bohemian hippie beach town in Los Angeles. Like you can see it here. There's an outdoor advertising standing at that reads, Labubu so here, blind boss surprise, limited availability. I was like, wow, Labubu has really, traveled across the Pacific Ocean from Hong Kong to Los Angeles. We often heard, okay, Labubu's cute, but then what exactly is cuteness? So I'm here to give you some kind of like academic definitions, right? Cuteness refers to childlike physical appearances, like a very large forehead, a chubby face, large eyes, and a small mouth, like this baby schema here shows. And also not just, physical appearances, but also childlike mannerism, like a toddler learning to walk, someone talking in a very high-pitched voice. So more theoretically, some humanities scholars try to theorize as cuteness as an aesthetics that aestheticize vulnerability, meaning powerlessness as seen as appealing. And when you see something cute, okay, it will evoke the kind of like nurturing, productive desire, feelings of heartwarming and tenderness. And related to that feelings, there's a very weird but interesting thing called cute aggression. So because the positive feeling generated by cuteness is so overwhelming that sometimes, not always, you might have the desire to, pinch or even crush the cute things. So feeling cute or like encountering cute is an everyday experience that, many of us people, experience it, but it might not be limited to a particular culture. Very funny, some biologists even actually suggest that animals know how to recognize cuteness. So that said, in the context of like media and art history, the aesthetics of cuteness is often very much associated with Asianness. All right. So one of the reasons is that cuteness has a longer lineage in East Asian artistic traditions than in Anglo-American ones. It is not uncommon to find cute animals, like this kind of cute puppies you should be able to see in ancient Japanese paintings. But in contrast, in Anglo-American art history, they often dismiss cuteness as an overly sentimental aesthetics, right? And likewise, in today's world, cuteness is also more generally more common in East Asia. For example, we see, kawaii culture in Japan. We can see, there are like Hello Kitty airplanes. Even in Hong Kong, actually, last time I went back to Hong Kong, I saw, the Hong Kong police police force. They have the little gray mascot to promote cyber security. And I realized that the name Grape is actually derived from the classic pun Typhoon Pinzi in Cantonese, like very Hong Kong style, I found. All right. So before Labubu, I want to talk about there were retail mascot like Sanrio's Hello Kitty, which were successfully exported from East Asia to the United States. True, these retail mascots made it to the United States. But in fact, when these kind of like cute mascot travel from the less dominant culture, let's say, East Asia, to the more dominant culture, let's say the United States, its original meaning often became lost in translation. So the picture above here, you should be able to see, shows a Hello Kitty sign in Philadelphia, Chinatown. While actually Hello Kitty is somehow called as cool in the bohemian neighborhoods, like the Venice Beach that I showed you when I first start my presentation, and even it is cool in maybe some counterculture or like subculture media. Things like that, that are associated with Asian, like cuteness, especially girly cuteness, is often called as so-called ethnic, with the negative connotation of like being cheap, low class in more mainstream US culture. And very sadly, this kind of like negative reception even appears in some Asian American circles. In her book, Hello Kitty Must Die, Asian American author Angela Choi asserts that Hello Kitty actually embodies the stereotype of the dutiful, subservient Chinese daughter in her book. All right. So we can actually unpack this loss in translation further. Cuteness is seen differently. Sometimes, childish, other times, childlike. In East Asia, like in Hong Kong and Japan, it is socially acceptable for people to, build relationship with cute merchandise in general. Like, for example, young girls, grown women like me, or even, mothers, they would buy Hello Kitty lunch boxes, little panties, maybe for their friends and daughters. But in the United States, where white dominant media shape popular tastes, cuties tend to be read as childish, immature, rather than, childlike, playful, expressive. So cute things, like Hello Kitty are seen as kitsch, campy. Of course, there are exceptions. For example, I'm living in Los Angeles. There are fairly huge population of Asian and Asian Americans. For example, in Little Tokyo here, which is a Japanese town, you can see, things like Hello Kitty or even Labubu like very commonly. So, but then given the very, different perception, how is Labubu doing in the United States then? I don't have the exact answer, but I want to show you the two very contrasting kinds of association that celebrities here make with Labubu. Okay, so the first examples I'm going to play is Katy Perry, who presents herself as an anti-fan of Labubu. So an anti-fan is someone who's like very invested in hating a thing. Katy Perry often shows a strong dislike, even hatred toward Labubus. The second example is our, Michelle Yang. Unlike Katy Perry, she publicly acts like an actual fan of Labubu. Right, so playing. All right, in contrast, let's see.
And you have Labubu cakes, and this is before the trend happened, Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah.
You were ahead of the game. Do you love Labubus?
You know why? I think they look like me.
You are so funny. You are so much more prettier than a Labubu.
No, wait. I do have something for you.
From me?
my own collection. Dun, 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 dun.
Are you kidding me?
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, no.
I know you have two girls.
I do. Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Michelle, you are the nicest. My girl's gonna love this. From Michelle Yeoh, you're the best. Thank you for this. Oh my gosh. I love them. They're so cute.
Cute, right?
They're the cutest
See,
thing.
there's one M and there's one Y.
Oh.
See, this one is Y. That stands for Yo.
Yeah, exactly.
M.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate
Now you have
this.
Michelle Yeoh with your girls.
I do. I love this. How'd you get into Labubus? When did you get into them?
Oh, quite a little while ago already.
And how many?
So I cannot play, all of them because of time limit. So my question then is, with the, more representation of Asian in mainstream US media in, 2025 now, can Labubu really be widely seen as cute? Then again, I don't have the exact answer, but I did some homework because this is so interesting. So a few weeks ago, I traveled to Malibu, which is a pretty white affluent beach town in Los Angeles. Like imagine when me as an Asian woman went there, I didn't see any other Asian at all. So I visited a gift shop that primarily targets white women. Labubu inspired products are everywhere. Interestingly, Labubu as a trend is even localized to fit the holiday season here. All right, so people in the States, or like people who have been to the state, would realize that we be very mindful of like not calling the holiday season as just like Christmas, to accommodate maybe the Jewish Hanukkah holidays. So you can see this is a set of those cards here, and it mixes Malibu with Labubu and called it Malibubu. All right. And there are also other merches like keychains. And on the right, you can see there are Labubu stretch balls that are designed in Beverly Hills, another, very affluent neighborhood in Los Angeles. So my observation of this phenomenon so far is that although, Labubu in general is still pretty quiet in the very loud media and retail landscape of the United States, Labubu, given that it is made in Asia, it has already traveled very far. And this is the end of my presentation. I was so jealous when I was like seeing you guys like socializing. So if you're interested in talking to me, please email me and get in touch. All right, I will stop sharing my screen, and then we can start.
Thank you to all of our presenters. I think it shows you just in those 3 short presentations what cultural phenomenon means when something, an object, in this case Labubu, becomes a cultural phenomenon from many different angles, many different perspectives. Also in terms of intergenerational audiences and lovers, and sometimes not lovers of Labubu. But it made me think about going back to the roots first. I wanted to start about going back to the artist himself and why he created it and sort of where he comes from. So in researching Kasing Lung, who is the artist, he calls himself an artist of Labubu, he is from Hong Kong, but as some of you know, he spent much of his formative years and remains in Europe. And he talks, though, about how his early days as a young creative, how he sort of came up with this idea of Labubu. I'm going to quote from an article I read about his impulse and his background. Quote, his parents ran a restaurant with their home above it. To avoid disturbing his parents and the customers during the day, he would quietly read and draw in his room. Examining Lung's drafts, it's not hard to find many of his childhood life experiences in them. He was most exposed to Nordic elf picture books, which show similarities in his later works. Like the Smurfs, Labubu is an elf living in the forest. The inspiration for Labubu comes from Kasing Lung's own life, mischievous, but inherently kind and brave. Some things I wanted to do, but didn't dare to, so I let Labubu do. I thought this was a good way to start to think about some of the presentations that we've heard today, but also some of the points that came up between us, thinking about this person who is of Hong Kong descent, but is based elsewhere, and where the role of pop culture comes into creativity. And is that what artists reach for when they're, let's say, displaced from their country of origin? So that's something that interested me in terms of what the impulses are for an artist to create something that eventually has an international appeal, has an intergenerational appeal. also the idea of toy makers locally, that there's a history here of that. So it's just something I wanted to sort of like lay down in terms of a background for the artist. So I had also some questions for each of the presenters, and I don't know if you wanted to comment on that sort of objective, because that sort of to talk about that first, or I can ask you sort of some questions I had for the panel today.
I mean, I'm a sociologist, so what I normally do would not try to trace creative work or cultural phenomenon back to specific individual experience. But at the same time, of course, one of the interesting thing about Kasing is that, you know, he was born in Hong Kong, and then following his parents, left Hong Kong and lived in Europe. But I vaguely remember that in the 1990s, he was back in Hong Kong for a while, and as a designer, as illustrator, and so on. And that was probably also the beginning of his connection with a lot of other designers, and also the creative work along the line of designer toy. That I would think is the kind of environment and milieu that would shape his later work. And at the same time, of course, it's always interesting to find the sort of very special feature about Hong Kong. For example, one point that I didn't have time to touch on is that in the late 1990s and early 2000, for the development of designer toy in Hong Kong, one very interesting factor was that around the very end of the 1990s, there was the Asian financial crisis. So at one point of time, Dongguan was not as busy as it used to be. And that opened a window for a lot of designers to find a manufacturer in Dongguan, and they would entertain the idea of producing small batch figurines. Because otherwise, you know, these people are producing for the US toy makers, that easily they would say, okay, you need to start from a unit of 10,000, 100,000 units before I even turn on my machine. But when you have a depression, one of the nice things is, okay, I need to make some money and make things work. So I entertain the idea of small batch. Because the whole designer toys thing is that, you know, you need to be small batch in order to make it expensive, quite honestly. So that are the interesting connection. And at the same time, I mean, I still don't have the answer. If anyone here connected with pop-up, please help me to relate this question to Wang Ning. Is the curve that just shown is that, you know, you see it, Labubu really took off around 2023, 2024. And also at around the same time that Labubu became not just plastic or vinyl, but also a piece of plush toy. That is the end of 2022. So how that chemistry comes about. And also not, of course, one of the things is the idea itself. The other thing is, of course, in Dongguan and in China, you can make this possible. That no matter how sophisticated the toy that you want, no matter how additional processes you want to bring in, not just vinyl, you spin it, but also make it plush with colors. Those guys over there, they would always say, you know, I can do it for you. And also at an affordable price. And that is the interesting chemistry. And Hong Kong, somewhere right in between, between the technical know-how, between the idea, between the designer, the creator himself or herself, and also the outside world. You know, we always be able to find a position here. In this regard, I tend to think that, you know, the Labubu story is also a very interesting Hong Kong story.
Can I add something? Can you guys see me? Yes, right. Okay. Can I add something that Ingrid and Tai-lok just said about, the maybe cultural origin of the designer? So one thing that is super interesting about the Japanese kawaii aesthetics is that when Japan tried to export anime and manga to, other parts of the world, including the United States, since, 1960, after the World War II, they actually, those like transnational Japanese companies deliberately design, racially, culturally ambiguous character, like meaning they didn't want people to quickly perceive, okay, this is like Japanese. For example, if you see the manga and a lot of like anime characters right now, they are still mixing the Caucasian features with, some kind of like East Asian features in their design. So this is a very interesting how a lot of like transnational companies, they try to strategically want to generate a design that has a wide appeal and people wouldn't be immediately associated with a particular culture. Even, you can, kind of like infer this is from, Japan, this is from Asia, but they want to tell, this character has a different kind of like backstory. For example, Hello Kitty is actually a British girl with that white face, but no mouth. All right. So this is a very interesting how, when they try to export it to other parts of the world, they try to erase or like even bring down, the or make up some kind of like backstory of that character that is like dissociate from maybe the creator, like designers, like cultural origin. I just want to add on another fascinating thing, dialogue. When I'm actually writing a book on cuteness, and it is about cuteness in the US and East Asia, I realized that cuteness, especially girly cuteness, became most prominent when there was a widespread economic crisis, like the Great Depression, the Great Recession, and the COVID time, which exactly echo what you just point out.
No, I just want to. I totally agree. Yeah, the like Labubu and also like Hello Kitty doesn't like have like when we look at it, we cannot connect it with like a particular culture. But I still do think that maybe there's something. This is part of our conversation. I still think that there is something different with Labubu. It's like Hello Kitty. And also a lot of like the manga, the Japanese manga, right? It doesn't, when we read it, we also doesn't really think of Japanese culture, but initially they were, by and large, like Hello Kitty is still designed within Japanese cultural context, I would say, if that makes sense. But Labubu is not, right? It's initially, we cannot say that it's designed within Chinese cultural environment, right? So that's the difference. But it was taken by a Chinese company, and with the resources, infrastructure, and manufacturing power necessary that available in Chinese mainland, and make it a global phenomenon, right? So that's the point I try to make. The difference. Yeah.
I wanted to start with that origin story, just because I don't think a lot of people know why just to hear from the artist and why his impulse to create a character. But of course, once it reaches, I think, being defined as an object of obsession or being a cultural phenomenon, it goes into what other people put themselves into through the ownership or the collection and their own stories. I think it's something, maybe Natalie can touch on that it's intergenerational. We hear the story about how with the Blackpink star carried it, you see Michelle Yeoh, but then you see children, it touches upon that it's an intergenerational phenomenon. But it's not unlike other phenomenons. Like I started thinking, what was my object of obsession? And in keeping with the idea of the vinyl plush toy, or that category, let's say, it was like I had a Mao Shishi, I had Hello Kitty, and I still love them. So I started thinking, what holds us to these objects? Are they our carriers of our emotion, carriers of a time of nostalgia, a safe place to like any your childhood toy, right? That some adults still sleep with them. So I don't know. I wanted to maybe Natalie can sort of touch upon that a little bit. In your research, it seems to be you're thinking specifically about not the statistics particularly, but the beyond all reason, because that's what obsession is, right? Beyond all reason, we attach ourselves to these objects, we collect them, and that's not unlike, I would say, other art objects in museums as well, that say something about our culture.
Yeah, thank you. I think, what you just point out is very valid, and is often, like key to the cuteness culture is that these kind of like cute merchandise, when we're collecting them or we are like sending them to our friends or like exchanging them, with our family members, so on and so forth, we are forming some kind of like network of care. Because I realized, like I just, response to Dialogue's observation is that even, United States, during the Great Depression, one of the very, very profitable, like most profitable stars was a 6-year-old child star called Shirley Temple. And there were like mother fans, like girlfriends rushed to the department store to buy, her like Shirley Temple fashion, Shirley Temple dolls, like engage in all those like Shirley Temple fashion shows. And then these people were like forming a network of care that was like very rare in those like difficult times. All right. So you say a lot of people would, question me when I first tried to do, cuteness. They say, oh, why does it matter? And then they would often see, Hello Kitty as something like quiche, like a quiche, like a campy thing. But I realized, no, my mother would, buy me Hello Kitty lunchbox, and I would see, other like girls, they would use it as a social strategies to make friends and build relationship. And if you recall, when I was like introducing, my presentation, I show you guys, like the Barbies that I collected. And I realized my personal experience to Barbie is that even though a lot of like feminists, like even like especially like Anglo-American feminists would criticize, Barbie as like kind of like reinforcing some kind of like unrealistic beauty standards. But my interaction with them is just what Dialogue said, in his presentation, that we are using the toy as some kind of like very active, interactive experience. I like playing Barbie because I can use the Barbie and dolls to talk to other Barbies. And then I'm like, making up stories using them instead of like, I am, just conforming to their very, unrealistic beauty standards here. So I think, one of the things about, why we're so obsessed with this kind of like cute object is that there are many people involved in it, and then we want to make certain kind of like relationship, especially positive relationship with people through these toys. All right, like I when I see, maybe I'm not actually very much like like I don't like Labubu a lot, but I see my friend wearing this is kind of cute. I want to learn and be like her as well. So I think, the social aspect of this is very important. And I think it's a very neglected perspective, because a lot of time, when a woman and a grown woman tries to, do things like that, people would say, oh, she might just have, princess syndrome, or like she's like, so obsessed with herself. While when men are, playing toys, they're, being cool or like being Peter Pan. So this is my feminist take on that.
I like that you showed also the Barbie, but as Anime Wong. I shared a message with Chris recently that they just announced the director for the Labubu film. So it's not going away, and it's going to and I started thinking about films like the recent, Wicked films, and this idea of fan culture, and of course the idea of connecting as an adult. I started thinking of like Comic-Con and like cosplay, and this kind of idea that you can still, even as an adult, perform this, embody yourself, this character that has brought some kind of connection to you, that speaks for you. I also wanted to bring up, because of course they have also different Barbies that represent many different sort of types of women now. But it was interesting to think about this idea that you were talking about, Ben, that it's not a specific kind of character. And the story of the idea of the monster, of course, brings us to Gothic literature, brings us to, there was a New York Times author who was bemoaning her daughters, being very upset, not being able to, the idea of the obsession, not being able to obtain an original Labubu, but she calls it sort of a cross between Maurice Sendak, famous children's authors, Where the Wild Things Are, and Amal Shishi. So we all have different kinds of associations and also differentiating through time. But I also thought of the Brothers Grimm. I just wanted to bring it back to this idea that it's, tells his story, it tells other people's stories, it tells the stories of the region, tells the story of, like you said, and that changes over time. Another thing we talked about in terms of how things change over time, because, of course, China at one point is known as the factory of the world, generating lots of toys, also electronics products for the world in certain, different era. And now it's generating either through physical objects or through soft power, as you were talking about, Ben, Labubu as a phenomenon. So I don't know if it has the idea of formerly made in China now become created in China, and what's the difference?
Well, it's no longer, definitely no longer just like made in China. Like you give us like designs, so we just made it happen according to your wish, according to your design. I think in the case of Labubu, what we can find out is that, and of course this is also still preliminary findings. What we can find out is that this cooperation, like this relationship between the designer and this Chinese company, right? The Chinese company not just like realizing the designer's designs, but make it maybe bring it to the level maybe the designer initially couldn't believe, right? I was thinking that if like initially Longcastle maybe license it to a different company, like to a European company or even American company, will Labubu be this global hits like we see now today? Probably not, right? Because the PopMart, this Chinese company, like I said, has a different kind of like a set of skills, a set of resources that are not available in Europe, in America, right? But also this could happen to other IP or other designer, other intellectual property, right? So it's, if you will, it's like you have some rough idea, and now instead of just a Chinese company just manufacturing it, create it, make it happen, it's like they can help you to realize your dreams, if you will. Does that make sense? Right? Turn your rough idea into like a profitable product, and also they also make profit out of it in the process. Right? That's my observation. Right.
I'll probably just like to say a word. It would be a very long journey actually from manufacturing to cultural creative. It won't be a very straightforward thing, and it will take time, and also you need to have a more encompassing, I won't try to use the word strategy, but you need to work on many different fronts. For example, Japanese pop culture really get into American and European markets. They're not just talking about manga. They're talking about animation, they're talking about fashion, they're talking about other experiences as well. Same thing for we are now talking about Labubu or created by China. You need to have a long process of gradually people would be able to connect and to understand the real connection between an object and the culture at the backdrop and so on. At the same time, how culture travels. It's of course, again, a very interesting topic. I mean, Hong Kong happens to be a place that we reopen our door and warmly receive Japanese pop culture very early on, even in the 1950s. Whereas in many other Asian countries, actually it took them a long, long time to really allow Japanese culture to get into the society. Hong Kong turned out to be very, very on. We allow for Japanese movies coming in and so on. So, I mean, now I'm 67, 68 years old, but way back when I was a kid studying primary school, already that we are following Ultraman, we are following Japanese TV series, and that makes us, very receptive to not just Japanese culture, but also all kinds of things, daily necessities, ideas about aesthetics, and so on and so forth. That's the reason why you can explain why Hong Kong people would take going to Japan as fan hong ha, that kind of thing. It's a long way, it's a long process, but at the same time, it means you have to cover many different dimensions in order to make it possible.
I wanted to, this leads me into maybe a little bit of my expertise. I wanted just to share a little bit, but it makes me think of an upcoming show, I should say, in coming to Hong Kong at another institution. And plus, next year we'll show an exhibition called Myths, Monsters, and Manga, which will deep dive really into all of these aspects. So I wanted to share that. But it made me think, of course, there's the Labubu exhibition here. I also came to Asia Society for the Yoshitomo Nara. In my former role at Taikun Contemporary, we had, Takashi Murakami. So I wanted to sort of look at the art angle in the way in which objects of obsession, let's say from design culture, and I'll just reference it that way, but crossover more into sort of pop and design culture, permeate the cultural site in terms of museums and exhibitions. Having attended many, many exhibitions in my role as a curator and doing research, there was a certain trend, and I would say it continues, where the gift shop was really, really important to the layout of the exhibition, in terms of all roads lead to you ending up in the place where the merchandise exists, or as we know with Murakami, there's twice now the crossover with Louis Vuitton. There is also, there's so many more. And also, I wanted to touch on Natalie's presentation in terms of how it's being absorbed in other culture, or in other, let's say, in other countries, because I found out that the subgenre of Labubu is La Fufu, when it's, what in fashion is called the trickle-down theory, when it goes from, the original and ends up being, the fake handbag, the fake, and is it a fake Labubu, is it a real Labubu, what is it worth, and so we haven't really touched on the, let's say, the economics, but it's very, very large. But I just wanted to touch on that there is a crossover to exhibitions, to museums, and to this idea of just collections in general. Why do museums collect? To tell the history of cultures at a certain moment of time. Now there's lots of discussion about provenance. Where is it really from? Should it go back to that location? And so I think I wanted to sort of touch a little bit on that in terms of my first comment about, how the artist self-identifies and what was his story in terms of then, and when does it get picked up by other people and absorbed into their own narratives that's meaningful to them over time. I don't know if anyone has any other further comments, but maybe if with that we can open it up to the audience if there are any questions, and we can keep talking as well.
Thank you to the three panelists and also to Ingrid. This is really enlightening. My question follows on from Ingrid's last point, actually. Like, is there a direct nexus between specifically cuteness and the phenomenon of collecting and how we're obsessed with it? Because just a little anecdote, like this year's Art Basel when the market was still pretty down. There were a couple headlines of the only thing that sold out was the Labubus at Basel. So, is there any direct nexus for that's specific to cuteness vis-a-vis people collecting watches, art, or cars, sort of thing?
I can say just a little bit about that, but then I do want to pass it on to obviously the panelists. It's about access and also about volume and also about marketing. So I mean, there's lots of things that are tied into this idea of mass market, this idea of things that you can afford, hence the idea of the gift shop and you can own a piece of. Again, in my past life, I helped work on an art book fair, and there was always that also has a subculture of like objects, things that are accessible to people can relate to. There's a little bit about that, the fact that you talked about how it's both monster and cute, but cuteness is just I think it's something we can all relate to. I think Natalie talks about, I was interested in her, she didn't talk about it today, but she researches like pet Instagram, right? There's like live bodies, live cuteness too. That's like another whole other thing. And we all love the cat videos, right? So there's, it's about access. I think for me, it's about that, access, volume, and dissemination, however you want to talk about it. But maybe our panelists have another more to add.
Well, the point on access and scale and so on, I think they're well taken. At the same time, I think we need to recognize that there are different, how would I say it, different kinds of making things collectible. I mean, you have very diverse interests. Some of them very specific, some of them maybe very mass market oriented. Though at the same time, it always required people involved to make their connection. I'm not a Snoopy fan, but I have some of my friends who are super keen on Snoopy, and they keep on telling me that how a thinker Snoopy is. So even though that there's no expression, just you're looking at Snoopy from a cross section, and then they can create narratives and ideas and all kinds of things. For me, I keep saying that this is something static. I don't see what you see. So what are you going to tell me? But for his or her friends, I mean, they shared, and that's I think would be important, because you have the fan base, and then you have the people who actively create and fill in the narratives and make it possible. But at the same time, don't forget, there are people who are people like me. I mean, I collect figurines of Alien. It has nothing to do with cuteness. My wife always complained that it's super ugly, and so on. And I must confess that once I went to Tokyo and I taught for 2 weeks and I got a stipend. Before leaving, I went to a toy shop, and then I find that there's a scout, kind of 2-to-1 proportion of Alien. And if I spend all my stipend on it, I can afford it. And I thought about it for 2 hours in the same place, walking around. And finally, I decided not to buy it, simply because I fear that if I put it in my luggage and then they do an X-ray scan, and then I would be arrested. What kind of thing is that in your luggage? And so I gave it up. But upon coming back to Hong Kong, I regret it. I keep saying it. That is the thing. It's just cost me a few thousands, and this is once in a lifetime, and so on. Is it killed?
What's the tipping point, right, of obsession? Because that's what it is. Beyond all reason, we still sort of go forward. I also didn't want to be too cynical. When you mentioned Snoopy, I thought of the Peanuts gang, I mentioned, the origin story of Labubu is, this idea of an elf in a forest, which means there are other monsters, animals, characters in that forest. It's also about fan communities, either online, like it used to be fan clubs, now fan communities, now Comic-Con cosplay, like IRL kind of fan communities. It's also about, in this era of, digital culture, people talk a lot about loneliness. It's about building also connection. I think and maybe Cuteness is the way in, because it's a soft place to start. But maybe because you speak about it, maybe Natalie can say more.
I want on something, other than, Cuteness can very effectively provide a network of care, is that we can actually think about why cute things are so collectible because of its very formal properties. What does that mean? As if you think about Cuteness as an aesthetics, it is actually very highly codified, very formalized, meaning they rely on almost formulaic visual cues to very reliably evoke, heartwarming tenderness emotions. This makes, like producing cues very cost effective, and which means you can see a lot of like variation of cuteness, right? It can be a large variety of merch from fashion to, toys to different kind of things. This is a very special formal properties of cuteness that make it, so collectible, I would say. Okay, and then again, it's the affective, like talking about emotion thing that we talk about, because cuteness tends to generate positive emotions. And if we think, more theoretically or academically, because this happiness will stick to the objects. We are collecting, these toys or merch, not just, collecting the material objects, but we're collecting the happy memories that are associated with it, and then building our home as an archive of these memories. So that's why, they're so collectible, it's so fun to see them. Maybe, Tai-lok have some kind of like fun memory with those aliens that he collects as well. So this is
yeah, it definitely made me think and organize and helping to moderate this panel, like everyone's got something that they're collecting or obsessed with or know someone, or even we watch online, right? From tiny things to like car culture. It's endless. We have a few more minutes. I don't know if there are any last question or two for our speakers here today.
Oh, can I? Oh.
Hi. I think one issue is the marketing and the commercial promotion of these companies. Pop Mart is very smart, and there's certain ways of promoting it, like limiting circulation. You can't buy it, and you create a shortage. Because the other way would be flood the market, right? Generate more income, but instead, it's limited the sale. So created this demand and the desire. So my question is that if any of the panels have looked at the economics in the market manipulation of these toys. Like Hello Kitty is very astute in marketing. It's created all these genre, different forms, and then it created the Asian American anime Wong because of the backlash. There's a critique. Why they are all so formalized and so white, right? So if you, in your studies, in your observation, if you look at the market manipulation of Labubu's phenomenon. Thank you.
Just want to say one thing we did not talk about, but I have to mention, of course, the Pop Mart philosophy is the blind box, which is unique to them, which is basically you don't know what you're getting. You're getting a Labubu, but you know what? You don't know, So it's sort of that, the idea of anticipation. So I definitely wanted to mention that aspect. But also, the other thing I wanted to say was in my research of Pop Mart, of course, they have many characters under the same idea of, let's say, the marketing scheme of the blind box or the economic scheme of the blind box. but not all of them, none of them, I would say, are Labubu. So there's something about that particular character, the zeitgeist, what it represents, and sometimes when things come back, like the Barbie through the movie, or again when it becomes resonant again in culture. But maybe our speakers can speak to, because you did do some. We may talk about your graphs now about tracking the changes of the Labubu bin.
Right. That's definitely a key reason why PopMart's business is so successful. Blind boxed and limited volumes of products. But like I said, other than Labubu, I think there are other IPs. To my mind, it's fairly easy to get the product you want. Of course, you still need to go through this blind box. I also have a collection of PopMart's products because I also a Star Wars fan, so I purchased a couple of their Star Wars products. Find a very interesting, a very interesting experience. But I think the key point is whether it's a deliberate strategy. That actually I don't know. Also, because they understand that the IP has its own. PopMart itself, IP has its own life cycle. So they also, of course, they want to make profit out of it as long as possible. So whether that is a smart strategy, but certainly it's working now, right? It's something that I cannot tell. Maybe you can tell me.
I tend to think that there are two sides of it, and to be fair to the producer, the manufacturer. Point number one is we have blind box for more than 20 years. At the very beginning, Kyoto, Hoyongtong in Japan, they're always playing with the idea of blind box. If you really want to get it, blind the whole set, buy the whole set, and then you guarantee you have all you want. If you don't, then it is blind box. So blind box is always with us. It's not the only having PopMart to play with that trick. The second thing is, I think from all producers, there's always a dilemma. You either mass produce it so that you have a lot, but then the value would drop. The other thing is you do the manipulation. Of course, they try to combine the two things. But don't forget, in between these two extremes, you always have the fans intervening, meaning that you project, as a producer, you project this would be the real popular one, and people would chasing it and collect it and make it collectible. It may turn out to be different. Quite honestly, you don't necessarily follow the script prescribed by the producer. Sometimes the fan, 5 years down the road or 20 years later, they will say, oh, way back in 2025, actually is, well, I shouldn't say that. Actually, it's not that, limited edition one really clicked. But in fact, the other one, no one paid much attention to it. No one bothered to buy it. But in fact, only 2,000 people in the world now possess it. And so that is the reason why now you have to pay a lot more in order to get it. So the fan also played a role in between. But you're right, the game is different. Because if you have read some of the interviews with Wang Ning, one of the things that he makes sure is when he promote PopMart, he wanted to do a strategy very different from the designer toy originated in Hong Kong, because the market is too small, too limited. So you will never be able to go global by doing something like that. So you need to change the entire strategy. And then one of the things, of course, is you look for your own IP, sign the creator, and then as a way of doing that, you start how to market it, not just within a small place, but in China and also other parts of the world. And that make it a combination or balance between being very massive and at the same time to make sure that people would still be interested in following the new products rolling out in the market.
Natalie, did you have any last comments, being the furthest away and also maybe the receiver of how far the marketing has infiltrated other places around the world?
Yeah, like honestly, I didn't like study any, marketing related to Labubu at all. But while I was like, doing research on Hello Kitty, I realized one thing that is very interesting because Hello Kitty like merch often priced at, like very differently. They have like very premium stuff like Hello Kitty jewelry, and they have like really affordable like Hello Kitty panties, for little girls. So there are like wide range of product that people can buy and collect. I think this is a very maybe like this is something that I noticed like very unique about the cute merchandise. And just like Hello Kitty merch, like Shirley Temple merch is also like that. So there are like very cheap stuff like a like Shirley Temple kind of like a what is it called, dress, which is like more affordable, but there are like more premium like dolls for like more affordable like people who are like more can afford that. So I think the range of prices is something that I realize very unique in terms of like this kind of like cute merges. But other than that, I don't have like any expert information on the marketing of like cute merges at all.
I think your field trip was the showed people how far and wide that the Labubu phenomenon has reached. So I think with that, I'll just sort of say that the Labubu, obviously we're talking about this idea of phenomenon, which means it's very broad. We're talking about an exhibition, we're having a public conversation, but we've also talked about how, for some of us who are a little older in the room, we have maintained very I'd say nostalgic or reminiscences or long-term connections with our own personal Labubus of whatever variety. It's very private sometimes, very personal, and hopefully I'm sure that will continue either with Labubu or to honor all of your personal unnamed collectibles. So with that, I wanted to say thank you to Asian Society and to all of our panelists today and to our audience for coming this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, hello. Hi. Hi, I'm Chris Wan, Head of Gallery and Exhibition at Asian Society Hong Kong Center. So to quickly wrap up the event, first I want to thank you to our speakers to bring us this profound and interesting dialogue on a Sunday afternoon. I want to thank you, all the audience, to come to Asian Society for us to have this open dialogue. So on behalf of Asian Society, I want to present our speakers a complimentary gift. It's our membership, 1-year membership to all the speakers.
How about me? How about me?
Natalie, we will mail this to you. Yes, and to our audience today, if you haven't been signed up to the membership program, please join us to the Asian Society membership. We have a great program. We have a lot of exhibition and events coming up next year. So join us, stay connected, and we will have fun. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Hi, Natalie.
Yeah, there we are. Okay.
Yeah, let's get a photo.